May 14th Board of Education to order. And communications and recognitions. I do have some. Communications. This has been a complicated budget year. We sent out our budget to the Board of Finance in February with a 2.88% increase. Then the pandemic hit, and as well as did our economic uncertainties. In the end, together, we were able to whittle down to a 0% increase for our taxpayers. The $500,000 was removed from our operating budget and put into an escrow account. This did decrease our current operating budget by $500,000. But as Tim O'Brien states, yes, the Board of Finance and Board of Ed are still working out the details of how the escrow funds are accounted for and distributed ultimately to education. It's an ongoing process, but we are committed to working on this together. He states if the town collects all the tax revenue, then the education budget will be able to be level with this year. If, however, the economic pains and a pandemic drastically affects the town and the state, we will have to examine all budgets. We have never in history had to deal with such uncertainties, and it's true, and I appreciate everyone's hard efforts and works, and we will continue to work with the Board of Finance and communicate, keeping open lines of communication. We're going to need that this year because things are going to be constantly changing. There'll be ebbs and tides. Going forward, the superintendent did state that he will not include budget items in parent emails, so this will kind of help with some confusion of messages so we can keep it all on the same playing field. On another note, I want to thank Stonington High School teachers and administrators for distributing the SHS 2020 grad signs. Thank you for posting on the social media and the videos. It was so positive and uplifting. Seeing people's faces, I think everybody appreciated it, and I think everyone really needed it. It was a small bit of a spotlight for our grads. They're missing out on a lot this year. So nice that we're trying to keep on carrying on some of our annual end of the year traditions, albeit a little bit differently. The mother-daughter banquet is tonight. Sorry we had to miss that. I did send a message along for them to read to them that the Board of Ed wishes all of them well. And thank you to Ms. Ellis and Ms. Berger for making sure that this continued. They're doing a Zoom banquet, so that's very nice of them. Play for the Cure is going on tonight. That raises money for Camp Rising Sun, a camp for 5 to 17-year-olds who are battling cancer, and the Lisa Wentz Day Scholarship Fund. Thank you, Mrs. Houle, for figuring out how to somehow carry this out. They are playing the 2017 game and then interviews with players and coaches. So thank you, Mrs. Houle, for carrying that on as well. There was one other event going on tonight. I'm sorry, I can't remember it. I just want to say thank you to everyone for doing your best to try to make things as somewhat normal for these kids as possible. Any other communications? Sorry, I'm muted. Going on to comments from citizens. Brendan Murphy says, good evening, Board of Education members. My name is Brendan Murphy and I live at 67 Moss Street. I have 2 children that attend the amazing West Vine Street School. I just wanted to express my severe disappointment with the Board of Ed budget being cut by $500,000. I believe that it's extremely short-sighted on the part of both the Board of Finance as well as the Board of Selectmen. In my correspondence with members of both Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen, they explained to me what unprecedented times these are, the likes of which we have never seen before, and I agree. This is exactly why the town of Stonington has over $15 million in its rainy day fund for times like these. The money should have come out of the rainy day fund rather than our children's education. As we approach a school year in the fall, the school district is all likelihood, is going to have to comply with social distancing guidelines. There will be a need for more staff and greater programming, not less. I ask for you to fight for the $500,000 be put back into the Board of Ed budget. I also ask that it is impossibly at this point for you to please find a way to not reduce any student programming nor any staff. The letter that went home to parents on Friday night from Dr. Riley was the first time I was made aware of the cuts to the Board of Education. If I had known sooner, I would have voiced my concerns publicly prior to the budget being adopted. Thank you for your time tonight. Stay healthy. Brendan. That was all the public comment that we received for tonight. I'll move on to the consent agenda. We do need a motion to approve the consent agenda. I do want to point out there's a healthy food certification. In case anybody has questions on that, we can remove that and approve the other items and keep the healthy food for certification for discussion. But if no one has any questions, we can approve the consent agenda items A through D.
I move that we accept the consent agenda items A through D as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Can I have, are there any nays? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Forgot to unmute.
You're good, Elisa. Thank you. We'll now move on to the budget discussion. Dr. Riley?
Yes, thank you. I sent out an outline for the discussion earlier today. I would like to go through this and welcome any suggestions, directions, discussions on these issues. The first thing I'd like to mention is the timing issue. Typically, we want our budget totally resolved by the end of June, and that's because we need to be planning for September. We hope to have as much accomplished by the end of June as possible, but we may not know by the end of June exactly what our schools are going to look like, how much distance learning, what some of the issues will be. So when I bring the detailed report along with some recommendations and a list of options for you to consider in June, you may want to be thinking about not cutting the full 1.6 million from the original proposal, but cut as much as we need to get the year started. I would also like to point out that we have negotiations with 4 of our classified units pending, and those would need to be discussed if the board wishes to do so in an executive session. So and I will in June have a report that covers as many of these items that are on this outline as possible, along with your discussions this evening. The second item here is possible new changes. There are 15 items here, and I'm sure this list will expand as we move forward. The mental health supports for students and staff and behavioral supports for students is something that if you read about some of the needs nationwide, mental health support is going to be one of them. I'm not, again, on these, I'm not making any recommendations. I'm just bringing them to your attention. Distance learning, the Chromebook replacement and repairs, and other materials that our teachers may need, depending on, again, what our configuration looks like. Additional facilities and classrooms depending on state and health requirements. We've calculated that we can have around 10 or 11 students in a regular sized classroom with a teacher if we maintain the social distancing requirements that are in effect right now. Additional transportation due to the limited number allowed on our buses. Again, if we have the 6-foot social distancing, that obviously cuts down on the number of students that could ride any one bus. We are already getting requests from parents and questions from teachers about summer and supplemental programs. We realize that some students may be behind where they would like to be at this point in the year, and we will be addressing that with teachers and with parents over the next several weeks. We're not final with the summer program, but it looks like we will not be able to have regular summer school. And so we'll be looking at what can we do in the fall or even next summer to provide additional help for students that need to catch up. The next item is the high school credit recovery. Students that have not been able to maintain their course credits for graduation at the high school may need additional assistance. Grounds equipment to maintain the landscaping responsibilities. We were in agreement with the town to help with some of our grounds responsibilities, and they needed to make those reductions in their budget. So for us to keep our 2 new schools and the other schools looking good, we'll need to have some equipment that we took out of our budget, out of our SIP request, because we thought we had that other agreement. Custodial and disinfecting equipment. Peter and his crew have done an amazing job on a daily basis disinfecting not only school buildings, but town and fire and other buildings. I believe it's around 19 or 20 buildings that are being disinfected almost on a daily basis. And we're running out of equipment. The PPE requirements, this is a scary one. The CDC recommendation currently is if schools open, for every child in a school and every staff member, we would need to provide masks that can be changed twice or changed once, have 2 masks per person per day. Just calculating the cost of masks to open our schools, if they just opened it and we had to provide masks, we're talking at $500,000 just for masks. And we probably would not be able to get them anyway, because if everybody has the same requirement, there's not enough money or masks to meet that need. Potential medical costs to employees due to the COVID. We don't know what that will be, but it's likely that we will have additional medical costs. Special education and general education, additional instructional requirements. We're not sure what that will look like, but we're looking to cover whatever needs there are. Increased need for family engagement outreach to the disengaged. Right now, our mental health staff, our counselors, our assistant principals and teachers are all in contact with their students, obviously every day, but there are some students that need that extra help, and that could increase in the fall. Professional development to support best practices in distance learning, and increased costs for substitute teachers depending on the impact of a fall spike. The concern, the story I heard, everybody comes back, they go in the classroom, one student, for instance, is sick, the rest of the class has to quarantine for 2 weeks, along with the teacher and any other staff member that came into contact. And then kindergarten readiness support. So these are 15 things that we put here. I'm not saying that we're going to have to do any or all of these, but these are things that I think the board needs to be aware of as possible new issues, new things that the district needs to address as we move forward. The third item is some options for consideration and discussion, because we do need to make reductions. The first one is, again, I want to put these out here with there's no recommendation tonight, but these are some things that I'm certainly looking at. I would like the board to consider. The first one is use of the health benefit reserve funds with the understanding that we would need to replace those for the following year. If you recall, we need to have 130% of our anticipated claims. And we will have that. In addition to that, we have approximately $800,000 that we could use and not have to deal with personnel issues in this coming budget, but we would have to have a plan to bring that back the following year. The other post benefits, employee benefits, is something that we'll ask Gary to give us a short summary in the report in June. But these are paying for retirement benefits that our district doesn't have, but we're required by certain accounting requirements to put money in the reserve anyway. That doesn't make sense. And we will be recommending that we do not put that in our budget. We take that out of our budget rather than deal with a personnel issue for this coming year, with the understanding we would have to fill that back in. Another item for board discussion, either now or in June, would be to charge the town for facilities use. They're direct costs. We don't charge for facilities per se, but we have been paying for both custodians and utilities to the tune of about $130,000 a year for all the rec programs, the meeting programs, and the other needs. That's something that we need to consider if that's something the board would want us to look at. We have savings from the recent oil and gas bid. That's just under $100,000. That will come out, be part of the reductions, because we were successful in that, in getting that savings for next year. And then there are personnel reductions and changes. I put here again to consider the need for the mental health personnel. We always consider attrition and leave of absence before any kinds of layoffs. We've already eliminated one administrative position, the dean position, and I'm suggesting that we also eliminate the assistant principal at Stonington Middle School, the second assistant principal position for next year. That would be another savings for the budget. And then I will be looking at certificated and classified reductions and bringing back not only my recommendations, but other options for you to consider in the June meeting, along with the possibility of reducing athletic programs, teams, clubs, and extracurricular at all levels. So those are some of the things that we'll be talking about either this evening. Certainly would like your input on the charging the town, if that's something you'd like to consider, and some of these other things. Item number 4 in this is just some other actions that I want you to be aware of. We are suggesting that we postpone the SIP funding for the Stonington Middle School roof. This is funded to be accomplished this coming summer, but we can wait for a year. That'll give us more chance for additional funding from the state, the matching funding from the state. And it will certainly help, it's about $1 million, help with the town with their cash flow concerns. I mentioned negotiations, and we also have a number of non-association positions, individual contracts we have that I will be bringing back recommendations for extensions of those contracts with whatever additional COLAs are applied to those. I'll bring those back in June. And I say here, follow the Stonington town direction with those individual contracts, because the town did increase salaries accordingly based on whatever criteria they had. And I will be following that, bringing those recommendations to you at the next meeting. And one last thing in this section is the federal money. We were notified yesterday that we will be receiving $280,000 to be used on these one-time COVID expenses. This could be for technology, for saving jobs, that kind of thing. We will not be able to realize that full amount because some of those funds go to non-public entities such as Pine Point and St. Mike's, but we should receive $230,000 to $240,000 to help offset some of these costs and some of those items that are mentioned in number 2 under new items. And then the last thing was kind of an update on the current year. We are still dealing with a number of encumbrances we're trying to clear and bills, and where Gary's been working on. He did finalize the first student contract, but there's still some other issues out there. We're confident we can provide the $350,000 ending balance, and we're fairly sure that it could be more than that. we're right in the middle. I guess you haven't been over to the district office, but if you recall, we have the plan to provide the safety features, the doors, and the foyer entrance, the safety entrance, and redoing some of the configurations of the offices and adding the air conditioning for the offices just in that front area that don't have that air conditioning. That's in the middle of that project, and we will finish that. But I'm suggesting that we put off the second and third phases, which would be doing upgrades on the upstairs classrooms, some of the gym areas, providing AC for the large conference room, the old cafeteria, those kinds of things. And I just don't think this is the time to even talk about that. There are a few things we've tried to hold off on any kind of purchases because we know that we want to return as much as possible to the town. But we are looking at anticipated custodial items for cleaning and disinfecting our buildings. Peter's already put in an order for some new disinfecting machines and the items that go in those for the foggers. But we will need to purchase those. Chris is looking at the tech needs. We're asking our students to keep their devices over the summer with the acceptance of some that will change out for different types of machines. But it didn't make sense for us to try to collect everything and reconfigure them and clean them all and then maybe have to give them right back in August. So our students are keeping theirs over the summer, but there are a number that need replacement and repair. So we need to do that so we'll be ready for school in the fall. And then I mentioned the grounds and maintenance items. The finance committee had asked us for a more detailed explanation of this. But again, what happened here is we had an agreement or an understanding. The town wanted to help us. It was a great idea. Everybody was on board. And then with this budget cycle, the way it is, they had to reduce their staffing. And so now the town will still take care of the turf fields, but we'll be mowing all the other lawns and doing all the other landscaping, et cetera, around our buildings. So we're going to need to have some equipment. So we'll be sharing those needs with the finance committee. But those are the three only items that we think we need to spend. We're going to try to save as much as we possibly can. And if there are any other unexpected items, we'll bring those to the board and the finance committee in the meeting. That was my update. I would welcome any discussion or questions.
Does anybody have any thoughts on any of the ideas that Dr. Riley presented?
I have a question. Dr. Riley, on the maintaining the fields in some of the areas around the various schools, you ever thought about just hiring an outside company to come in and do that?
I talked about that a couple of years ago. That we'll look into that. See if that's. There are some legal issues with taking work, but we'll bring that back, Jack, as an idea. Thank you.
Jack, I was thinking the same thing because if we are still trying to work on this MOU, purchasing equipment that we may not need is excessive and maybe not the time to do it. So if it's going to be a cost savings, it's something I think we should at least look into to see the cost and the variance. One of my thoughts was if we are able to, do we know or have any concept, is there any talk about the ECS and how much we think, or do we have no idea or concept on what they believe they'll reduce?
As far as I know, we have nothing from the state as far as their budget and where they're going with that.
Okay, because I believe that as the Board of Finance, I know, wants to be able to return that $350, if it looks more secure that we're going to get that ECS, then I would be comfortable with taking another $350 out of the healthcare reserve, because then we could say, oh, let's put that $350 back in when we get it, if it helps with the costs during this beginning of the year. I don't know what other people think. I thought that might be a pretty safe bet once we have some more sure footing on those ideas.
You mean 350 from 2021 reserve or 350 from the reserve?
From the healthcare reserve, the healthcare account, because we have 800,000 above the 130%. So
Okay.
if we took a number that we think we're going to get returned, maybe that would help in reducing the cuts in other areas. But I do want it paid. I don't want to count on getting that repaid next year, because next year is also going to be another difficult year. So I don't just want to rob Peter to pay Paul. I think that's right. Are there any other thoughts of ideas that we want Dr. Riley and Gary and Peter to look into? I know I had asked also that we talk very carefully with the town to see what equipment they might have that they could let us use, again, rather than purchasing, so that we're all kind of sharing the duties here. And I know that Danielle was going to touch base with Barbara and have Barbara and Peter discuss that with each other.
I would like to hear your thoughts on charging the town for the facilities used. These are for, we're not charging for the maintenance of the building or anything else. We're looking at strictly the cost to come out of your budget for custodian's time, custodian overtime, and the utility cost to keep the rooms open and for recreation to use it.
May I? This is Farouk. I'm personally not for it. So just, that's my thought on that.
I'm not for, I think that's not a great idea as well.
Craig here. I am actually for that. That's very common practice at colleges, where you have to create a work order and a charge every time something's done. And it isn't so much, I think the amounts of money aren't necessarily what's so important, but it does provide information on how much different areas are actually working and, the resources they're using. So I think from that perspective alone, it's worth doing, just so you have a better idea of exactly who's doing what work and how it's getting paid for.
Sorry,
it's a good idea.
This came up a couple of years ago, or years ago, I'm going to say, unfortunately, I think it was longer ago, when we did the fields, and we had a big group looking at charging for fields, and then it went into charging for buildings, and we nixed it because it got a little hairy. But there was a big committee, and and you must remember that, right? You were there, right?
Yeah, this was really to look at outside groups coming in. And, we do, if somebody comes in for profit, there is a small charge. It really isn't much. Nonprofits don't pay. This was really a question, if you're interested in us, it's unfortunate we even have to ask this, because we really want to work with the town. We have a great relationship. This whole idea of helping with our landscaping and with the snow removal, I mean, we're making some really great progress. And I can sense what you're saying. It would be nice if we didn't have to even think about this. But if we're going to take money that could be in a classroom and pay for, other town uses of our buildings, I just want you to be aware that that's something that it's a possibility. That's all.
Well, again, maybe it could be done as a trial basis, just as an accounting for a year or two, to actually see what's involved without any charges, just tracking it. But as I said, this is extremely common in colleges. They do this all the time. So we could do it on a trial basis, even for 6 months or something, to get some idea of what's involved, rather than have a study group per se. Maybe you just do walk through it and see what it shows us. It may be so de minimis that we say we don't want to bother doing it, or it may actually wind up to be a lot more than we thought.
And I can provide, why don't we do this? I'll provide, we actually have that, Craig, for this year. A breakdown out the hourly custodial costs and the utilities. And we'll put it in on the June when I come back with the report with recommendations as an option. You'll have some more detail as to what it looks like, and maybe you'll want to do something with it or maybe not. But I can provide what the information you're asking for, Craig, at the next meeting.
And just for the record, I'm with you, Craig, on the concept of commonality of that practice. It is a common practice. And if this was on the table last year, I would have been all for it. And probably I should be all for it this year because we need the money this year. But we're all in this boat together. And, you know, my main concern is I don't want to create a perception of retaliation. And I know that is not the intent. The intent from you probably, and I'm putting words in your mouth, Van. But I'm assuming your intent is to keep the money into the classroom, which I appreciate and I would support. And if we get to June and this money is coming out of classroom, I'll charge the town. But for now, I'm against the concept because I don't want the perception out there.
Okay.
And do we know also perhaps there's a few less recreation programs that will be utilizing the schools because of the COVID and the pandemic? So maybe that cost, maybe we can reduce that cost a little bit just because they're not even going to be using the staffing or the facilities just because the programming is less. So no charge to them, but still can reduce our line as well.
Sure. I would simply ask between now and June, as you think about this is a lot of information, to please send me and Alexa any questions you have, any detail that you want, so I can make sure that at the June in my report and recommendations and options that you'll have all the information you need that night.
And I would also say any ideas that any board members have, because we're going to have to be very creative, please push that idea forward because it may morph into something else. We need to be as creative as possible that causes the least hurt to any of our students, and also you know, the town programs that come into our buildings all together. We need to be working on this together somehow.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts at this time, or we're just going to, would you like to wait and think about it, look through it, and then send emails to Van as far as what to look into and what you're really not in agreement with to help give them direction as they're coming up with ideas for us?
I think it's good to send ideas to, this is Farouk, I'm sorry, but it's good to send ideas to Van and let's see what are the implications of the budget cut to the classroom, because that's my priority.
Okay, thank you. It's very, I'm sure it's very difficult as far as all the administrators and teachers trying to plan for next year to have even more uncertainties than you could have imagined. Thinking that going into this one distant learning in the spring was difficult. This next jump is interesting to not have all the unknowns and to make sure we give our teachers the support emotionally they need, and our students is going to be a huge priority.
I did have one thought. Is it possible to get some information about whether we need to continue the OPEB contributions if we don't have any liability for them? That just seems great. It seems like there must be a protocol or procedure for getting out of that if you don't have any liabilities.
I talked to Gary about that exact question, and this is an accounting guideline, and some major laws would need to be changed not to have this requirement. It may be something that we could, ask the governor or whoever to consider, because we have no liability. We pay, we don't have lifelong medical benefits, those kinds of things. That's what really causes the concern with some other districts. But we'll look into it again, Craig, and get back to you on it.
Okay, it's just sort of, how do they calculate what our liability would be if we don't have any? That's the sort of the confusing part. I don't know. Anyway, but that's all I'll say on it, I guess. Thanks.
All right, we'll get that for you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And any other comments or questions, thoughts, ideas, please send those on to Van so they can get going on their part. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the update from Attorney Cheney. Below, I summarize the further steps I have taken to investigate the above named matter since our meeting on May 5th, 2020. Publicity. After our discussion on May 5th, 2020, I attempted to join the Stonington Community Forum on Facebook. I was not initially able to do so, as I do not meet the criteria for membership. Ultimately, I was able to join and posted information about the investigation, as well as my contact information on the forum page on May 7th. I drafted a similar statement to be shared directly with the school community, which has been sent via Stonington Public Schools email server to all Stonington High School students, parents, and staff. I also reached out directly to several individuals who have spoken to the Board of Education at their meetings, been identified in the New London Days reporting, or have been active on social media concerning Mr. Chokas. To date, none of these individuals have responded. I contacted Joe Wojcik of the New London Day to inquire as to the genesis of his reporting on this matter. He indicated that students and others reached out to him over a period of time via email, text, and social media. He also indicated that as a Stonington resident and parent in the community, he knew many of those who contacted him personally. Increased communication. The posting on the Stonington Community Forum quickly led to a number of contacts via the confidential email and via text messaging. Between May 8th and today, I have interviewed 10 individuals, mostly current or former students, but also some adults. All of the interviews have proceeded remotely, either on Zoom or in 2 cases on FaceTime. Scope of current former student interviews. 1, 3 current and or former female students stated concerns about Mr. Chokas' treatment of female students in his classes, including themselves. 1 former female student stated that she had heard from a number of friends about negative interactions with Mr. Chokas, but had no direct experience of negative interactions with Mr. Chokas herself. 2 former students of Mr. Chokas, both females, spoke in support of him, and each stated that he had never had any negative interactions with him. Scope of adult interviews. An adult, a parent of several students, indicated that she had concerns about Mr. Chokas after hearing reports from her children and some other students, and had shared these concerns with the administration of Stonington High School. Another adult, Stonington Police Department Youth Officer Thomas Page, confirmed that the high school administration had consulted with him about incidents with Mr. Chokas in 2016-17 and 2018-19 school years, and that he had informed the administration that neither matter constituted criminal conduct, but was rather a human resource issue. Continued referrals. One of the female students who reported herself to have been the subject of some of Mr. Chokas' inappropriate behavior identified 2 other students who she believed had experienced inappropriate interactions as well. She informed me that these students plan to contact me once they have finished their college exams. 1 adult, a parent of one of the students' witnesses who had concerns about Mr. Chokas' treatment of her, stated that she and her daughter were comfortable with our interview and that they would urge others to come forward. Planned interviews. I have scheduled interviews with students and an adult member of the community who is a father of students who attended Stonington Public Schools. I am continuing to reach out to individuals with relevant information via email, phone, and social media. In addition, several witnesses interviewed have stated that they will refer additional witnesses to me for interviews. I expect additional community members, students, parents, adults will continue to make themselves available for interviews, as is often the case in an investigation into allegations of inappropriate conduct by an adult against minors. Once a few witnesses have come forward, others choose to participate. If there are any other questions about the course of the investigation to date, please do not hesitate to contact me.
So can we comment to that? I don't think we really learned anything more than what's in the newspapers. The thing that's different is now the stories have legal authorization. So we can say with authority that apparently it happened. More specifically, it's apparent from Attorney Cheney's investigation that students' learning environment was compromised. And Chokas did engage in uncomfortable, creepy behavior. Attorney Cheney's gathered many of these stories, and many of them we've heard already from the paper. Also, I think it's apparent through the attorney's interview of the youth officer that there was no process and procedure in place to address an adolescent girl's fragile concerns during her sexual development. She reported it to the officer, or it was reported to the officer, and the officer basically said, it's not really criminal. And the concerned adolescent was passed on to human resources. I'm not quite sure what that would look like. So we don't know the end. We hope in the next, 10 years or so, OCA will confirm that the process and procedures were not in place. I don't know when OCA is ever going to get to us. I think that that's important. Maybe because of COVID, it's no longer that relevant. But so to summarize, I see that for over 14 years, a group of female adolescents in the fragile stages of their sexual development felt uncomfortable, unsafe, unsupported, and there were no processes or procedures or capable adults to assist them. So for the major part of the day, these adolescents lived in developmental and environmental discomfort. Each one of them and their families are owed an official, sincere apology. And I feel if the administration won't or can't give it, that we as the board must be responsible and craft a long overdue apology to our community. The survivors deserve a long overdue validation. They need to know that there is a guilty party and it is not them. So from that, no one's getting fired. Chokas is protected with the terms of non-disclosure and other different arrangements. But I think we as a board need to finally acknowledge that their learning and development was compromised. And I'm not sure what our objective, I'd like to hear what people think the objective of the investigation continues to be. And that's why I have proposed that I think that an apology is something that will help to lift some of the dark cloud that hangs over. And Craig and I've had this discussion, but I don't think of it as being a reconciliation. I don't see bringing anything together. I see just acknowledging a time that adolescents were very uncomfortable, and that we are putting things in place that will help that. And hopefully OCA can help us with that.
Don't we want to wait to see the results of the investigation?
I
mean, why are we, if we're going to go ahead and do this anyway, why do we, it just seems to contradict doing an investigation. It's sort of like we should do one or the other, but I don't know. I feel like we should wait. We have, the investigation isn't even completed. There isn't an analysis or a summary. If we've already have conclusions, then why don't we just stop the investigation and proceed? So I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me to proceed that way, I guess.
I guess that I'm trying to be realistic of where this investigation is taking us. And I am really mindful of every penny, particularly now. And so I don't see strategies or results that are producing too much else, except I think that because it is out and people would like to have their stories heard, that we definitely should keep the investigation going for a while. But I think that we should continue to assess it realistically. What is the end result that we want from this investigation? And not to keep pushing it further. I do think that a very positive result would be a community apology, realizing that things were not in place and there were people that were made really uncomfortable. With more stories that she gathers, we don't really have specifics of the stories. I don't know if she's going to give it to us. Is what she gave us as detailed as it might be from her interviews? No.
I'm sorry, Heidi, I believe once the investigation is completed, we'll get more of the details. I think the issue is you don't want to skew those who might want to come and speak to her, or prevent other people from wanting to come to speak to her. So we're getting just the surface. She has more of the details, and if we would like more of that next week, I think if that's something we like and we feel we're ready for that, if we feel we have enough information, won't interfere with the investigation, I think if that's what people want, then go ahead. I do agree on the idea of certainly an apology. We did put down a deadline of June 1st for the interviews, so perhaps we should wait until that deadline before. I would hate for people to not come forward because they think we're done.
Right. And
that's my fear.
I agree. I think it's fair too, because that's out there, and I think that will help in some of the healing that some children may think that they need.
I think you also have to keep in mind too, I mean, it is conceivable that the court will could come to a conclusion and say it is more of an exonerative sense. And so you also, I think you have to be careful not to sort of get ahead of the report and apologize and then have Attorney Cheney say the district really didn't do much wrong. I mean, that's, I think, sends a mixed message as well. So I just think you need to keep in mind, you don't want to sort of get ahead of yourself on this either. And that's why I mentioned the reconciliation to Heidi. I mean, I think of this, again, more about acknowledging and reconciling. And that can certainly include apologies or not or whatever. There's people who do this. I don't know exactly what the procedure would be, but I'm definitely in favor of rebuilding and repairing, however we go about that. So I would like to keep it in that sort of positive sort of framework or direction that we're trying to build trust and restore goodwill and trust.
Yeah, I guess the trust maybe will come after a acknowledgement that these children's concerns were something that needed to be taken seriously and to help to validate, because they carry the guilt now. Nobody believed them. Nobody really listened to them. So then maybe what they have to say is not really true. So they continue to carry that. So this is relieving them of some of that burden and some of that guilt. I still don't understand the reconciliation part, but I do, as I have always said, my concern is for these children, these past children. These are a responsibility as well, that they graduate with a solid sense of self and a good feeling.
I'm sorry, I was muted, Jack.
I agree actually with both Craig and Heidi in many ways. I think that, our job, whether it's this investigation or looking at, how we're going to manage the budget, is to get really good data and then to review it and make a decision. Now, we're not going to have that data, and hopefully it's going to be good data. It's going to be good information. But we're not going to have it until we get the report from the OCA. Is it OCA? I always miss. Is that the acronym? Child Advocate. And the report back from our independent investigator. And I think we really can't render any kind of a judgment until that point. We know something went on. We know it's probably, like Heidi said, I'm sure the learning environment was compromised. We don't know to what extent. And I really so happy that Heidi's a part of this group, because she's always, she's very concerned about these students and their emotional well-being, and that's super important. But I also think it's important not to put the horse in front of the cart, and we need to wait till we get the 2 reports back and then try to formulate what we should do as a board in terms of a response. I think it's important that we get it right more than that we get it done quickly, to be honest with you. I know everyone's tired of waiting and this report's going on, but after all this time, if we rush or we make a statement that ends up not being accurate, then we've quite frankly mismanaged the situation. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
I have to go with Craig and Jack. I think that we need to get everything. I think what she's giving us now is not snippets of the conversation, but we need to hear the whole thing from everybody and all together in one coherent whole. And I think Alexa's right that if we just come up with something now, everyone who might want to talk to her is going to say, well, why bother? Like, they're done. They already issued, came up with their ideas or their opinions. So I think we need to wait for her to be done and do it right and not mess it up.
I guess I'm trying to look more for an ultimate objective of this, why we do continue this. And I think it's out there, so we should. And I think that thinking about it as gathering it for a valid apology is still important, because there's still quite a few anecdotes, I think, that need to come in to give us data to support what we do believe. But I don't see this as an excuse or as to put us into a strategy of cutting people off at the knees, rolling heads. I see this as giving an end game, a resolve to these kids. And as I said, these are children who have come forward and think that nobody is paying attention to them, that this is something that, as one said, it's as if it didn't even happen. So I want them to know it did happen, and gathering more data is really important. But I'm trying to make it clear why I think this investigation is important, that that we don't ever let something like this happen again, of course, but we've already begun to put that in place. But that we're not going to come up with a big blaming, pointing finger, as much as we are going to help validate these concerns that these children had. So I'm not calling a termination to this investigation, as much as I am trying to make it clear why I supported this investigation and why I think that it's very important for these children to have this happen.
Thank you very much, Heidi. I think everybody is moving together more on the same page as far as what they're looking at from what I've heard. And so if you have other questions for Attorney Cheney, please let her know. Anna should be setting out that doodle for our next meeting. I think she was a little busy today. It didn't get out today. So then perhaps we can also think of how do we want more detail at this next meeting? What are we looking for from that? And you can help define what that will be. Again, I don't want to mar up the investigation and hold back people from wanting to say what they need to say. But if we're ready for more of the details, maybe we need to look into that as well. So please just let me know what you're thinking and what we should do as far as that goes. And Heidi and Craig and Jack, I think, and Elisa, I think I'm hearing generally all of the same consensus. So thank you for everybody's thoughts and your opinions. Next on, does anyone else have any other comments or thoughts at this moment? If you think of something after, please let me know. Next, we have the report of the Superintendent of Schools.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to ask Marianne to report on both the distance learning and the plans for next year. She and her curriculum people have been working on both of these and doing an amazing job. Marianne?
Thank you, Dr. Riley. I'd be happy to. So last week I asked our building principals to provide me with some names of faculty members to serve on what is going to be a newly formed district distance learning plan team. This team will meet for the first time next Wednesday, May 20th, with teacher representatives from all 4 buildings, including representatives from general education, special education, and our special area teachers. 3 members of the district curriculum team will also serve on this team. At the kickoff meeting next week, the team will review the highlights from the student, staff, and family surveys, the data that was compiled on May 1st, and begin the process of identifying both the successes in the current plan and the areas in need of improvement to adjust the plan in anticipation of having to have that distance learning plan in place for the upcoming school year. As mentioned in my curriculum report for the board, the survey results specific to each school for all its constituencies, students, staff, and families are available on each school's website for your perusal. Please direct any questions that you have about those particular surveys to the assistant principals of the respective schools. I do, however, want to take a minute to share some of the highlights of what our families have told us thus far about distance learning. Approximately 42% of the families polled responded. When asked, how is your child's digital learning going on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being poor and 5 being excellent, the vast majority of families, 91%, responded with a score of 3 or higher, indicating that the current distance plan is working for their child. Out of that population of 91%, approximately 66% of those scores came in at a 4 or higher. When asked the query if they know who to contact with questions about distance learning, over 90% of the families reported that they do know who to contact at the building about any questions. And an extremely encouraging piece of information is that approximately 90% of the families reported that their child's workload is manageable. We will continue to build on these successes and make adjustments as we look to the future implementation of the model. But we're very proud of the work the teachers, administrators, and curriculum team have done over this to make this transition to distance learning as smooth as possible. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the families who have partnered with us in teaching and learning through this new model. Do you have any comments or questions about that? I can certainly give you an update next month after our team has an opportunity to begin. They have a very defined scope of work. They are not going to be in charge or charged with doing more than taking a look at what that structure will look like in a more, probably in a more structured format as far as keeping in line with the school day rather than being as free-flowing as it is right now. It'll be lessons learned. I'm happy to give you updates at the next meeting if that's amendable to you.
Mary, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do with students that don't show up for their, or who are not, basically not, have fallen off the face of the earth and are not participating?
That's a great question, Jack. And actually, we're actually capturing some more data from the teachers. We're partnering with some other districts right now to look at that specific instance of student engagement. EastCon has actually developed a very simple survey for our teachers that they're actually going to take tomorrow to give us that information about the level of engagement. Not just are they not showing up, but when they show up, are they having a struggle with completing their work without the proper support, or are they doing all right? So that's a great question. So we're looking at gathering that data because we know that we're going to need more supports next year on family engagement because we do have some kids that are not showing up. The last report I got from the building principals was at the district level, there were 8 students total that were really just not engaged at any level. We have a different issue as well, Jack, in that some kids are engaging in the content that they like, and leaving the vegetables off the plate, kind of thing. So we have to do that, and we will be asking. We have a plan to actually up our game on family engagement rather next year, and going after the families to say, what do you need? Is it technology support that you need? Is it that you can't manage the time? We've done a lot of work. Tina and Marika at the middle school level actually have been doing work after school hours with kids on executive functioning to help them just plan and organize their time. Because if you think about it, this model has thrown them more into a college format of having a lot of time to manage the work that they're responsible for on their own time. And that for kids who aren't used to that, that's a whole new challenge of how to work. So that is something that we're going to be looking at. It's actually one of the buckets that we're going to be looking at in the next piece of information that I'm going to update you on our reentry plan, because that's work that's going to continue to happen over the summer, and it's going to continue to happen over the year. Right now, we have the mental health team reaching out to those families and kids. We have our interventionists reaching out to those kids, our APs, and our principals, as well as Officer Page has been involved previously on this. So it's all hands on deck. It's all boots on the ground. But you can lead the horse to water, but at the end of the day, we can't have that. We can't go to their houses and force them to participate online. So part of that discussion with the teachers next week will also be, are there things that we can do? Maybe it's the fact that the kids need more live interactions with their teachers online. Maybe that will be more engaging for them and less independent work. It's going to be a conversation about that. So it's tricky, and we're not alone. This is something that every single district is facing, and in every district that I've talked to so far, we're in far better shape as far as kids participating in our online learning than any other district that I've corresponded with.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So I was going to bring this up later on under board comments, but this seems like an appropriate time. Are we making an effort to reach out to each and every kid in the school system? And the reason I say that is, I know there are some students who are in some pretty difficult family situations. And I would think, if we made some kind of an effort to reach out to students, each and every one of them, we potentially could, even if we helped only one or two. Not only are they dealing with family issues, but now they're trying to do distance learning. I know, Oberlin College, Clark University, those are the two colleges that my older daughters go to. Both of them have reached out to, and I realize that's at the college level, but have reached out to them on numerous occasions. It just seems like the right thing to do. I don't know who would
Jack,
do that.
I can tell you with confidence that those are conversations that happen at the building level constantly every day, and there's repeated phone calls and repeated emails and home visits. I mean, we have everybody and trying to reach out in every possible way. And again, if we're talking at the last report, 8 bodies out of over 2,000, that's pretty darn good. Can we be better? Absolutely. But please know that those building principals are on it and taking it. They do this anyways. They are constantly looking at attendance when traditional school is in play. But with this, they're even more hyper-focused on it. So it is happening. You might not see it, but it is happening.
And honestly, don't take it as a criticism. It's also a mental health issue for a lot of these kids.
Absolutely. They're not only dealing with what they had when they left school in March. Now we have loss of jobs. We have economic strain on families. We know there's probably all sorts of other dynamics at home that are under tremendous amount of strain, anxiety. That's why we're telling you that next year we're going to need more resources for these kiddos when they come back, not less.
Yeah. But as you know, I have a high schooler, and
Yep.
if the town or the district reached out to her at some point and said, she's struggling with some things, I think that would go a long way to show that we care, number one, and also perhaps actually help these students, be more successful. So that's, if we have the personnel to do that, then I think that would be it's just a suggestion.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
I think generally what Jack was saying is a good idea, and maybe it is being done already, but maybe we need to think of a different way that maybe would tap into some of these people, and I'm sure that's what your team is thinking of. Is there a group of inter-town distant learning or curriculum that are meeting together to kind of brainstorm as we're all seeing these problems and sharing our different thoughts and ideas?
There are several things that are going on. There are regional meetings with other curriculum folks through Learn that are happening. In fact, I was on a call yesterday. There are state updates. And informally, we're actually working with some more forward-thinking district leaders, because the problem with the State Department is they have to do a lot of committee building, and it's a slower moving. They have more voices and more hoops they have to go to in order to make decisions. We feel like we can work a little bit more quickly with fewer and very talented people around the table. So I think, again, just like we were leaders when we came up with our initial district learning plan, I suspect very strongly that when we start to formulate some of our components under our reentry plan, we will again be leaders.
Dr. Riley, the officer that Danielle had mentioned that they got funding for because of the pandemic, could that person be helpful to us with all of this?
That's a possibility. I've mentioned that to our leadership team. We really haven't taken that very far yet because we've got some other things going on. But there is so everybody knows there's I forget her title, community resource or community liaison, something like that. A person who can do the kinds of home visits and helping with mental health issues and following up if there are other family issues. So we do plan to take advantage of that.
Anything else? Okay, I'll segue into our updates on this, the reentry plan for the start of the 2020-21 school year. So, as you know, across the country in the state of Connecticut, educators are grappling with where to begin on planning for the upcoming summer and school year. Guidance from the federal and state government is slow in coming, and without specific direction, planning is a challenge. So it's being taken up on the local level. We have been in conversations with area district leaders, Learn, EastCon, and CABE to be proactive in identifying concrete steps we can tackle now in the planning process. The framework for Stonington's 2020-21 reentry plan has been drafted and will be shared with the leadership team as a working document next Tuesday, May 19th. Principals will be working with other district leaders once a week for the remainder of the school year to continue the development of the plan. This is a very involved and complex planning process. It will take a significant amount of time to develop and will remain a working document throughout the summer and next year as the circumstances continue to change. With many questions unanswered by our state government and public health figures regarding reentry, including social distancing requirements, safety measures such as classroom hygiene kits, sanitizers, masks, attendance requirements, length of the school year, mandated annual instructional hours, state assessment requires, and educator evaluations, it's difficult to define what the school day, the school week, or the school year will look like at this point in time. We are not alone. All districts are facing the same dilemma. We are identifying several tasks we can begin to address over the next few weeks and others that will need to be scheduled over the summer and as more guidance comes forward from the state. Once the academic components of the plan are defined, we will be in a better position to identify and estimate the costs of the operational components of the plan. We will be happy to provide monthly updates to the board, and we also plan on shortly giving updates to the staff and family as the plan unfolds. If you have any comments or questions. I will tell you that we are one of the first districts to actually formulate a team like this. There's a lot of districts that are just sitting back and waiting for the State Department, and they're going to find themselves, I think, in a tough situation if they wait too much longer for starting the work, because there are some components that we can actually move on now. Any questions? Dr. Riley, did you want to add anything?
Let me find my mute button there. No, that's well done. I think, of course, the biggest issue with the reentry is we really don't know all the parameters. And so we're going to have to plan for a number of different scenarios and different options. And that's what makes it tough. But that's what we're working on. Well, thank you. That's the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. I guess the main thing is there are so many unknowns right now. We just need to make sure that line of communication is wide open and people know where to go to ask their questions, because we're all going to have ongoing questions, as I'm sure our families will. So you may not have the answers yet, and as long as they know that as well, but as long as the same message is getting out to everybody, I think that's going to be very important to help with confusion and the feeling of being overwhelmed. Any other comments from anybody? Okay, next on the agenda are monthly reports. Any questions or comments? My only comment was that I had written down was I wanted to thank Mary Ann for doing that survey, which you already spoke about. I think that's helpful. I looked at one school's survey. I haven't looked at all of them yet, but thank you. That'll be helpful, and maybe to do a little bit every month or so. Do we have items for future agendas? If you think of anything, please just send me an email and we can add that to the agenda. I think there's so much going on. I don't know if we know a month from now what's going to be our top priority to have on the agenda. Do we have board comments or concerns?
Yeah, I have one I'd like to discuss for just a minute. I have talked about this topic several times now. It's about when we look at the end of the year actual to budget. If we could be more transparent in how we do our accounting, I think it would go a long way. I think a lot of the problems that we're having with the Board of Finance, I'm friends with a bunch of those individuals, and I just feel like if we change things a little bit, it would go a long way.
We won't hold it against you, Jack.
I know. I feel like it's two teams, and we should like duke it out. But actually, that's not what I want to do. I want to we're all part of the same town. So one of the things is, and I asked about this, when we have when we're under budget and there's money left in an account, it should be easy for someone to go in and figure out where that money ultimately ended up. If it got transferred out of that account or if it was left in that account, ended up going back to the town. When you go into the transfers, it's confusing, like when transfers are recorded. Sometimes they are recorded, sometimes they're not. I don't know what the threshold is for recording a transfer and then why we do it sometimes, and sometimes it appears that we don't do it. If we do it all the time, it's certainly not easy to figure out, to find a transfer out of a particular account. It's really about transparency, and the more transparent we can be, I feel like a lot of this, the angst between the two boards, a lot of it would go away. That's just my feeling. So if my question is, can someone explain to me, how we do transfers? I mean, is there a dollar amount that triggers a recording on the transfer item in our agenda? Who makes those decisions? Is there a ledger somewhere that's available to the public? For instance, at the end of 2019, we were short $120,000 in building admin salary. So when we covered that, where did the money come from? Did it come out of the excess of $421,000 in teacher salaries? It'd be nice if we could track that. And one of the reasons it would be nice if we could track that was because ultimately we're trying to do a budget here and figure out, really where did the money go? Did we properly budget for each item? And in the end, if everything just gets moved around, and I'm not an accountant, and Alexi, you can probably speak to this much better than I can, but if everything just ultimately gets moved around in the end to cover this account and that account, which I realize there's going to be some of that, it doesn't seem transparent. And it seems when it's not easy to follow, that's when questions arise. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. It should be really easy for someone to go in and figure out where the money gets moved to and into what accounts. So if at some point Gary could send me an email, or Dr. Riley, and just explain to me, about the transfers, when do they decide to actually record a transfer? Why in some cases do they appear not to record transfers? And specifically, when we have several $100,000 left in an account, is that not something that the Board of Ed should be aware of? And should there perhaps be a discussion? Now, maybe there is a discussion in the Finance Committee and I'm just not aware of it and I don't notice it in the minutes. But, those are my thoughts. And in general, I bring this up mostly because just standing back and looking at this whole situation with the town, it seems like there's a lot of, ill will between the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance, and it shouldn't be that way. We're all really playing for the same team, which is the town of Stonington. So when I speak to my friends over on the Board of Finance, these are some of the issues that they mentioned to me, and certainly if there's adjustments that we can make to make things seem more transparent, then I feel like we should do it. And again, maybe I'm missing something here. So thanks for your time.
Nope. I agree, and I think perhaps we maybe even have Gary, a time for Gary to come and explain to us. Is we're not criticizing what Gary's doing, we're not understanding, and they're not understanding. So maybe if it is brought us through the process, here's July 1, this is how we look at things, and this is how we do it, and then we can easily from there ask our questions. And I think then we'll all have a better understanding of how it works. And then if there's things that need to be changed, we'll know then, or ways we think it should be explained better or easier to us lay people, then so be it. I don't know what people think about that.
I don't think it's a matter of not understanding. I think we all sort of understand the concept of transferring money. I think it's more of trying to figure out a better way to document it. I know when I first got on the board, we literally got a copy of every single check that was written, and I'm certainly not going with that. We were getting things for $4.95 at Staples because they needed, a piece of cardboard. But I think that's what Jack is saying more is there can we try to think of an easy, simple, a more concise way of showing what accounts money is going from and to? Maybe I'm just speaking for Jack,
Sure.
but I think I would like to see
No,
that.
I understand. Right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there, Alexa. Exactly, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. She articulated it very well. That's, there's got to be an easy way to make this a little easier so people can see, if this is a published report and you notice that there's several $100,000 left in an account, one would say, well, okay, where did that money go? Did it go back to the town? Did it go into a different account? And if a citizen could easily figure that out, I tried to do it. I went back and looked at transfers. I had a friend of mine that's, has time on his hands, tried to figure some of this. It's very confusing, and, it shouldn't be. That's exactly what I would like to see. Perhaps just in a completely different system that would enable average people to figure out how the money flows within our school system.
So I would suggest we bring this to Farouk and the Finance Committee, and that's where these kinds of questions should come, and let's start there, and we'll see where we go after that.
Perfect. Then we can figure out how to answer Jack's questions and the Board of Finance and the average person, certainly.
May I? I just have comments. Sorry. Thank you, Alexa, for your time. I just want to, I agree with Elise and Jack in terms of there has to be a better sign off on some of these transfers. Sometimes I look at the transfers and there's signature by the department transferring, and sometimes the signature is not there, but the transfer happens. And I want to comment that every transfer that Peter actually signed off on it. So thank you, Peter. But the things that need to be, I guess our I's should be dotted and T's crossed, right? But the Finance Facility Committee meeting, next one in June, Jack, is going to be extended actually for about an hour and a half, just to accommodate a lot of the questions that could come up related to the transfer end of year. We had questions on in our comment today in the Facility and Finance Committee, some of the discussion was we wanted to understand every dollar that is getting spent, not in the, at the end of the year, because we want to communicate that in advance to the Board of Finance. So we want to do the right thing. On the transparency issue, I just want to publicly thank Gary and Van, who worked with me for 2 months on putting together a lot of documents to respond to many questions that came from the Board of Finance. And we went to that meeting, and Gary came to that meeting to respond and answer any question they had. I'm not saying that we were just good in what we did in the closing the last year. Definitely, we could have done a better job with that. We have taken strides towards better communication and more transparency with the Board of Finance. I don't think it was creative accounting, and I voiced that opinion to them publicly, privately, and twice on Sunday. I'm not for it. I don't agree with their decision. I'm not an accountant, nor I claim to be, but that's not how it works. You don't put money in a fund and then hope that the school system can budget for it and use it if it comes in. If it doesn't work like that. We want more transparency. We play on the same team. I'm in full agreement. What we've been trying to be transparent. We've been trying to respond to their questions. We've been going to their meetings. So if anything, it's a credit to the Van and Gary that they've been trying to be transparent. I agree with you 100%. We need to do a better job on our transfers and documenting them and signing them off on them. But I just want to make sure that it's out clear that the team has been trying to be very transparent with the Board of Finance. If they don't recognize it, that's on them. That's on.
Yep. Can I just real quick?
Yes.
Thank you, Farouk. You know, you're all volunteers, so I very much appreciate everything you're doing. It's more of a structural thing for me. It's like, what can we do? You know, you always can improve, right? Whether you're a business, a district, you always can make things a little bit better. So what could we do to make it easier to track the money? That's just essentially what I'm asking. And I don't necessarily have the answers, but if people can easily track the money, there will be less questions about, oh, what'd you do with this? What'd you do with that? Or, you know, you said you didn't have the money for this, and then you went and bought a Bobcat over here. And, you know, none of that's going to happen if you can track the money. And it's not so easy to track where the money goes. And so that's what I'm saying. I'm more advocating for a structural change to how, you know, whether it's, I don't know. I don't even know what it would look like. But right now, when I click on transfers in our, you know, when I go back to previous agendas, it's very confusing and it's really hard to track where, you know, where the money. So that's essentially what I'm asking.
Sure. Maybe we can have, Jack, maybe you can speak with Gary just in an immediate thing to help clarify some things, but we can have the the subcommittee, Finance and Facilities, work with Gary and Van on what you're asking for long-term.
Okay, thank you.
And it would be great if you attend our meeting next June. I'll make sure you're invited, Jack. It's really, it might help clear, because we're really going to talk about like end of year items. So it's helpful for you to kind of like come to that meeting. And I know it's another hour of, like, you know, I know how busy you are, and June, right? but really, I cannot stress enough how hard the team has been trying to be transparent and communicate with the Board of Finance. That's where my disappointment comes, is that we've been trying.
I appreciate it, and I will be there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Can I have a motion to adjourn? And whoever makes the motion, please say your name for Anna.
Farouk, motion to adjourn the meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second, Craig.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate everybody's opinions and thoughts and expression of ideas tonight. Have a good evening, and everyone stay healthy.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.